if you have a metabolism that is not working correctly, you have an accumulation of a lot of waste that is going to damage the cells and push toward aging. But if you have a metabolic system that is working properly, you will reduce strongly the accumulation of this waste.
Nicola Vannini is a researcher in the Department of Oncology at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. Hello again, welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast. I'm Peter Bowes. This is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity. In this episode, we continue our exploration of the gut metabolite Urolithin A. We'll do a quick recap in a second. And evidence that this natural compound plays a key role in the health of our immune system and our ability to fight infections. Now, the discussion we're about to have is quite detailed, so I'm going to start with a few pointers that will hopefully explain a few of the terms we're about to use. And a good place to start, if you didn't catch it, would be our last episode, an interview with Dr. Anurag Singh, a long-time researcher into the role of Urolithin A. In it, we cover the background in some considerable detail, and you'll find that interview in your podcast feed immediately before this one. In this conversation, we focus on a particular type of stem cells that are important for the health of our blood and immune systems. They're called hematopoietic stem cells, and as we age, we know their ability to do their job declines. The question, and subject of the new research we're about to discuss, is can that decline be slowed down or even reversed through exposure to Urolithin A? So let's get into it. Dr. Nicola Vannini, welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast.
Thanks. It's a really pleasure to be here.
So Urolithin A is a molecule that is metabolized by the gut microbiota. And the mother molecule is elagitanic acid that derives from red berries. You can find it in pomegranate. And once it's metabolized, it goes in the organism. And Urolithin A, it has been shown to promote the metabolic fitness of the cells, especially by targeting mitochondria. Because it's known that during aging, what happens is that you have accumulation of defective mitochondria. Mitochondria are the house power of the cells, so they produce the energy of the cells. And you can understand that if this machinery are not working properly, leads to accumulation of waste. This waste is damaging the cells and is inducing the aging process. So what urolithin does is has the capacity to target mitochondria, to induce the recycling of mitochondria. So essentially you get rid of damaged mitochondria and they get replaced by new fully functional mitochondria. So you reduce the production of this waste, the metabolic fitness of the cells is ameliorated, and you have rejuvenation of the cells.
Well, I'd like to dive into all of that in some detail and look at your new research. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your own career and how you came to this area of speciality.
I started my study in Italy. I did my master and PhD in Italy, and then I moved for a couple of years in US, in San Diego, the Burnham Institute. And afterwards, I went to Switzerland, where I did my postdoc. And then a few years ago, like in 2016, I started my own lab at University of Lausanne. And there, I'm really focusing on the effect of aging on the hematopoietic and immune system. So as a background, I'm a stem cell biologist, so I'm really interested to see the effect of aging on the hematopoietic stem cell, because hematopoietic stem cells are the mother of all the immune and blood cells. So if you have a healthy hematopoietic stem cell, that will reflect in a more healthy immune system. So essentially what we are doing in my lab is really to try to understand some of the metabolic features that are leading to the aging of hematopoietic system. Also, how we can target it in order to rejuvenate the hematopoietic and immune system.
Which is our special interest in this interview, and some research that you published recently in Nature Aging. And this really does focus in on immunity and, as I mentioned, our ability to fight diseases. Can you maybe just take us back to the beginning, what you set out to try to achieve, what your thesis was, what your idea was? Essentially, this was a study in two parts with mice.
Yes. So essentially, what happened during aging, in all tissue, you have this accumulation of defective mitochondria. And indeed, we found that in hematopoietic stem cell, it happened the same. So all the hematopoietic stem cell, they accumulate these defective mitochondria. And during aging, hematopoietic stem cell, they lose their capacity to give rise to old blood lineage. They give rise preferentially to myeloid lineage, and that is associated to immune depression and so higher susceptibility to infection and cancer development. And the other thing that is happening, hematopoietic stem cells are really important in the context of bone marrow transplantation. So during aging, they reduce also their capacity to reconstitute the blood system of a recipient individual. So essentially, we saw that in hematopoietic stem cell, there was this defect in mitochondrial metabolism. So essentially, what we did, we screened different molecules for their capacity to modulate the metabolism in hematopoietic stem cell, and the best performing one was urolithin A.
And how did it affect the mice? You treated old mice. How did they change?
So essentially, we did two sets of experiments. One ex vivo, so essentially where we took hematopoietic stem cell from old mice and we culture in a dish in the presence of urolithin A, and another set of experiment where we fed the mice and then we checked the immune functionality. So in the first set of experiment, we took hematopoietic stem cell from young old mice, and the one from old mice, they were treated with urolithin A. Afterwards, they were transplanted in recipient mice, and the results were quite astonishing because all the hematopoietic stem cell treated with urolithin A, they perform as well as the young hematopoietic stem cell. So it had the same capacity to reconstitute the blood and immune system of a lethally irradiated mouse. In the second set of experiment, we supplemented urolithin A in the food, and we tested the capacity of these mice to respond to a virus. So essentially, we infected the mice after a feeding period of 3-4 months, and we measured the quantity of the virus in the mouse. And the mice that were fed with urolithin A, they were much better in clearing the virus. So they had much better response to the virus. Not as well as the young mice, but they performed much better than old mice that didn't receive urolithin A.
And this was a synthetic form of urolithin A that you are using. And just for clarity, urolithin A, it comes in one form, whether we're talking about mice or humans, it is the same. It is produced in our gut, but we're talking about the same compound.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same compounds, and it was chemically synthesized. Essentially, we use a compound that is chemically synthesized, and we provide both or in the dish when we culture the hematopoietic stem cell for a transplantation, or we provide it in the food of mice. But the molecule is the same, the one that you have in mouse and the one that you have in human.
And you described the results as astonishing. To what extent were you astonished, and what are do you think, the implications of this?
So the results were quite surprising because for me it's several years that I'm working on different molecules that are known to modulate the hematopoietic immune function, but it's the first time for me that I found a molecule that has such strong effect. Obviously, the impact is quite wide because you can imagine that improving the immune function of older adult has a really big impact because we know that elderly population are more susceptible to infection and cancer development, and we can imagine that by boosting their immune system with urolithin A, we can prevent infection, but also we can delay the onset of cancer.
Which is really quite striking, isn't it? Now, what is the next stage? There have been some human studies, presumably more clinical trials involving people are needed.
Yeah, so we are now trying to set up our own trial with a specific category of patients that have a similar feature of immunosenescence that you can find in elderly population. And this category of patients are cancer-free patients that receive chemotherapy, because it's known that chemotherapy is inducing premature aging of the immune system. So now this effect is permanent. So people that have received chemotherapy, even they are cancer-free, they are cured, but the damage of immune system will persist. So the idea is to see whether urolithin A can revert these immunosenescent features also in this category of patients. And the other direct application that I can see for Urtin A is also in the context of elderly vaccination, because it's known that elderly, they respond much less to vaccine immunization. So we can think to supplement Urolithin A to this category of patients before receiving vaccine to have a more long-lasting response.
So, in addition to, and I frame it like this, reversing aging, or at least reducing the biological age of an individual animal, the applications, as you've described, are quite wide in terms of not only preventing disease, but treating disease as well.
Yes, so I can see both the things, because you can imagine that if you boost the immune system, you can, in an elderly population, you can prevent infection, the onset of cancer development, and but at the same time, being a molecule that restore the mitochondrial function, there are many diseases that carry mitochondrial mutation. So we can also think to apply this kind of supplementation in the category of people that have this mutation in mitochondrial machinery. So in a way to restore the metabolic fitness of the cell.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about, you kind of hinted at it earlier, the way that we get urolithin A without any supplementation is that we generate it ourselves, and a healthy gut is important to do that. And we know this from other research, that we as individuals, to differing extents, are able to produce urolithin A. Some of us are good, prolific producers, and others not so much. Now, in terms of your research and what it tells us, how do you think that is going to help us decide whether we actually need urolithin A supplementation? Because there's always this question, I think, in people's minds when we're talking about any form of supplementation is, do I actually need it?
So essentially, the only way to know that would be to analyze the own gut microbiota. But seeing urolithin A doesn't have any side effect, I think the supplementation would be a good strategy, both for people that has the right gut microbiota and for people that doesn't have it. Because if you get directly urolithin A, you have compounds that you know that you will be absorbed and you will have it in the body. So in both cases, I think it's well known that urolithin A doesn't have any side effects. So I would go for it.
And looking more broadly, you say you didn't expect the results to be quite as strident as you've seen. In terms of longevity science and moving forward, how big a impact do you think this better understanding of urolithin A and the process is going to have on us? Because clearly we've been talking in the past mostly about urolithin A, mitochondrial health, muscle strength. There's a lot of good research that shows that in human beings, supplementation with urolithin A can help us from a physical standpoint in terms of our strength, our stability, our perhaps preventing frailty and old age. But what you're talking about is going much broader in terms of the really killer diseases that could potentially shorten our lives.
Yeah, because there were several work that came out a few years ago now. Essentially, I think the impact of urolithin is so strong because it has been shown that if you rejuvenate the immune system, the impact that you have is in the whole body. So the effect that you have on the muscle, for example, yes, possibly is because of urolithin is affecting the muscle, but part of it is also coming because urolithin A has an effect on the immune system. So the effect on the immune system has a broad effect, and it can impact different organ, and as I mentioned before, also different disease. Because if you have, the immune system is the first barrier for infection, but also for disease. It's a kind of housekeeper to check that everything is working correctly. One of the aim of my lab is really to find strategy that can improve or revert immunosenescence. Because if you do that, it's not just the impact on the immune system, but you have broad impact on all organisms.
I want to ask you more of a general question. This is a podcast about human longevity. It is about healthy aging. It's about trying to maximize our health span, the number of years that we can live without chronic diseases. Is this something that you spend a lot of time thinking about, of the kind of lifestyle using science that we could be living in the decades to come?
Yeah, for sure there are... one of the things is for sure the physical activity and nutrition for sure. But the two things are going quite together, because physical activity is improving the metabolism of cellular metabolism. So if you do physical activity, you improve your mitochondrial fitness. And with specific supplementation of specific nutrients, you can achieve similar results. For example, with the Urtin A, or it has been shown also for example, NAD booster that can somehow improve mitochondrial fitness and the metabolism of the cell. When you have this improvement of metabolism, then it will reflect on the general capacity of the cells. Because as I mentioned before, if you have a metabolism that is not working correctly, you have an accumulation of a lot of waste that is going to damage the cells and push toward aging. But if you have a metabolic system that is working properly, you will reduce strongly the accumulation of this waste, and you can prevent, or like in the case of Urolithin A, you can even revert some aging features.
But you make an important point, and that is that we're probably looking at a future where, yes, supplementation to an extent is going to be part of our lives, but still, crucially, will be a good, balanced diet and a lot of exercise.
Exactly. Exercise for sure is key. I think is the two things are going together, the nutrition and the exercise. Because if you want to keep a good metabolic health, you need both of them. You need to stay active. You need to have a balanced nutrition, and you can also implement it with the specific supplements like Urolithin A. So I think the combination of all these things are really meant to improve the quality of life in the elderly.
Just one final thought. What kind of response have you had from the scientific community, and especially researchers involved in this particular field outside of your own laboratory? What has the response been to this study?
So they actually... the effect was quite, as I say, was quite astonishing, and also a colleague all over the world, when they saw the results, they were quite surprised, because it's for me and also for many of my colleagues, it was the first time that they see a molecule that was able, especially in the context of transplantation, to restore completely the blood reconstitution capability. And these results, they were presented also at the ASH meeting at the American Association of Hematology last year. And I had a really nice feedback from many colleagues. So I think the story is quite well received from the community.
Well, it is a story that we are going to continue on this podcast, that we are going to continue to watch closely. It is really fascinating research. Nicola Vannini, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks to you.
And if you'd like to delve into more details, to read the original paper, I will put some links into the show notes for this episode. You can find them at the Live Long and Master Aging website, lamapodcasts.com. This has been a HealthSpan Media production. We'll be back soon with another conversation. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening.
This podcast is for informational, educational and entertainment purposes only. We do not offer medical advice. If you have health concerns of any kind, or you are considering adopting a new diet or exercise regime, you should first consult your doctor.